Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. As you're playing the role of Trevor in Ghosts, you bring a unique energy to the show. How do you personally connect with the character, especially given Trevor's electric, traits that he has?
Ooh, electric traits. That's fun. I like that. I think for me, some of like the touchstones of him is he's a little bit of a stinker. As my mother would always call us stinkers as kids, and for whatever reason that word resonates with me. There's like there are these things that are kind of these tropes about him. You can use the word douche and frat and all that stuff. And people like those words. Those words are not very helpful as an actor, those kinds of labels. But what is helpful is kind of what kind of relationship exists inside of those things. And so the idea of someone being in this afterlife and being severely limited and just wanting to have as good of a time as possible because that's what he did in his life was
Yeah.
just to have as good of a time as he possibly could. Didn't matter what the rules were.
Mhm.
So I think there's this kind of like stinker puppyish quality that for me has always been the thing, one of the touchstones. And also, he gets to have something kind of unique to the other ghosts, which is he's still the youngest ghost.
Mhm.
And so for him, a lot of this stuff is still new. And so finding the things that are fresh and exciting to him that he can learn about, whereas other people have seen possessions and seen all these things that have been around long enough.
Mhm.
And there's going to be a few lessons that he's going to learn this season because of he hasn't been around to see as much of the history as many of the other ghosts have. It's an exciting season. There's some new things coming.
Trevor's lack, like you're saying, Trevor's lack of pants, is a recurring comedy on the show. How do you first react to this aspect of the character, and how did you make it work, especially with the context of the scenes?
I think my first, when I first auditioned for it, I kind of forgot about it or didn't even realize it was a thing because you're so focused on the audition and the things that you can control that something like that is just it doesn't even really register for you.
Mhm.
Then once we were moving to shoot the pilot, it was suddenly it was oddly a little bit of a relief because I had never done a comedy before. So I was like, all right, well, if I fail to hit the joke or something, they'll just pull to a wide shot
Mhm.
and see see that I'm not wearing pants, and maybe that'll take care of it a little bit. And then in the day to day, I'll tell you, there are some days where you just don't want to take your pants off. You just want to be a little more contained. But that's the job. So the trousers go down. There is a lot of technical work that goes into making sure that the show stays safe for CBS and we don't become HBO all of a sudden. So certain kind of holding yourself in certain positions and uh, especially upon sitting.
Yeah.
The shirts, there's a little bit of a dance and a choreography that goes on between me and our camera department to
Mhm.
protect audiences everywhere.
Mhm.
And we have an amazing crew who has my back, which I'm very grateful for.
With the dynamic mix of comedy and just having the character development in Ghost, how do you approach finding the right balance between humor and sincerity in the performances as Trevor?
That's a really good question. I think it's story to story, um, and it's also our showrunners Joe Port and Joe Wiseman, our writers, our directors. There's an episode this season that deals with some family stuff for Trevor, and it's directed by Trent O'Donnell, who directed the pilot and directed a lot of our um, episodes, and he's brilliant. And so there are these conversations you collaborate with the people around you because as an actor, the only person I'm never going to see act is me.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing it, so
Yeah.
you can't see it at the same time. And if I were like trying to control it, it would be a very, very bad thing. Would not be interesting to watch. So you kind of rely on the people around you to kind of give you a sense of orient you within the story a little bit, and hopefully hear your points of view and see if they land. And so there's that. And then I think there's also a little bit of good storytelling is a little bit unpredictable.
Hmm.
And so kind of if we're kind of playing in one area for a while, maybe it's time to make a hard turn and hit a different kind of note.
Hmm.
So there's a little bit of what is, and a lot of that is dictated by the story, but what kind of flavors do you give to a certain moment to keep it unpredictable and interesting for the audience?
Yes, for sure. Because I feel like he has a dynamic duos with different people on the show. Which
Mhm.
relationship do you find the most intriguing just to explore?
You know what? You're gonna get me in so much trouble by asking me to pick favorites with my cast. They're all so much fun. I've had such a great time exploring these different relationships. Um, there have certainly been ones. One that and I've enjoyed all of them. One that I'll just give a shout out to Roman Zaragoza. I have so enjoyed the Trevor and Sass dynamic, much more so than I ever thought I would. Because there's a funny thing with them where uh, Trevor is the youngest ghost
Hmm.
in terms of how long he's been dead, and
Okay.
Sass is one of the oldest, so he
Hmm.
knows the most, and yet the 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 age of them internally
Hmm.
is the opposite.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
I got you.
it's two of the youngest ghosts, but I'm quite a bit older than Roman is,
Hmm.
and so Trevor is a bit older than Roman is, and
Hmm.
and one of the fun things with Sass is that he is simultaneously the youngest in some way and one of the oldest.
Hmm.
And so being able to kind of play that dynamic, none of the other characters have that as much,
Yeah.
that kind of juxtaposition. So that's a lot of fun. But the truth is, everyone is a blast. And I certainly miss and wish I had more with Sheila Carrasco, who played Flower, who's just a genius.
Are there any aspects of Trevor's past from his time alive that you personally would love to see explored more in the future episodes? And are there any unanswered questions about his character that intrigue you?
Yeah, well, one of the fun things about Trevor is that whereas people, a lot of characters lived their lives with some kind of limitations
Hmm.
on them. Hetty lived an extravagant life, but was very limited in certain ways. Right? Isaac, was dealing with things about himself that he couldn't come to terms with. Pete, lived a very specific life, and certainly it sounds like he was a very good father and stuff like that, but there are different avenues he could have explored. Trevor seems to have lived his life to the absolute fullest when it comes to having a good time.
Hmm.
Maybe only rivaled with Alberta. Um, and so seeing the extravagance and the partying that Trevor went through and juxtaposed with his severe limitations now being in this house. And Trevor, even with Alberta was living in a very different world in terms of racial dynamics and stuff. Trevor, is oblivious to all of that in the world that he grew up in. So just kind of seeing that full swing of, oh, I could do anything I wanted anytime versus the complete the box that he lives in now. That's really interesting, and it's also fun to think of all of our powers, our little very mostly inconsequential ghost powers have some relevance to the way we lived our life or the way we passed away. And so understanding why Trevor has this unique power to be able to move things in the real world, um, I think that'd be a fascinating thing to explore.
Hmm. Are there any episodes coming up that you are excited for fans to see, especially pertaining to your character?
Yeah, there are, but I think the things that I'm most excited for is there's some storylines. about Pete coming up that are really thrilling. Um, there's a few of them. Uh, so I'll tease that. And when is this being posted or aired or
Probably like next week or so.
next week? Okay. So something's going to happen Thursday night that is going to set off a chain of events that is going to be fascinating for the rest of the season and is going to lead to a lot of discoveries down the road um, in terms of Pete. So I think that's probably the one I'm most excited for, and I got to watch them shoot almost that entire storyline. It was a thrill to watch.
What has been like the biggest lesson for you just being on this show with such a talented cast?
Oh, that's a really hard question. The biggest lesson, um, well, I'm constantly learning how brilliant the cast is. I think the cast is so funny and smart and dynamic. And our crew, and our Montreal-based crew, is so talented and such a joy to work with. So I'm constantly reminded of that. Um, I think, well, I think actually a step off of that is there's a as an actor, your face is on the screen, and so the sum of a lot of people's work ends up with a camera on your face. But there are so many people who are making that thing work, and it is such film television. If I would met film and television is a collaborative art form to an extent that I don't think most people could possibly grasp. So then going into every day and understanding, you may have a narrow lane to work in, but that's a little bit of a blessing because there's lots of other people with their lanes right next to you. And
Mm-hmm.
as a group, you're going to create this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think honoring the collaboration as much as possible and being a good teammate, I think is the thing that I'm constantly learning and constantly like this is like the North Star. How can
Mm-hmm.
I hit this? How can I make this thing work to set up the other people I'm working with?
Yes. Because I feel like with Ghost's unique blend of comedy and supernatural elements, what do you think sets it apart from the other shows in the same genre, and how does it resonate with audiences on a deeper level?
I think there's two things that come to mind. One is that I don't know where I learned this, but someone taught me. I'm sure a quick Google would answer it, but I learned at some point that if you have a severe limitation,
Mm-hmm.
like if there's a thing, there's a rule, it's something you can't do, leaning into that thing can yield creativity.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of like it's like a hyper focused thing. It's like, okay, oh, I can't do this. Okay, great. So what does that mean I can do? Or what does that limitation create? What kind of yes does the no create? And so I think the show does something really brilliant with that because we are all so limited. We have no way to affect it's very in only very small ways can we affect the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trapped. So there's this severe limitation then, but the yes that comes out of that no is that there's 1,000 years of history on this plot of land because we've been trapped here for so long.
Yeah.
So the show, whereas other shows are dealing with the lives of the characters in them, maybe can go back, a couple of decades, something like that, a few
Mm-hmm.
decades. We can go back to 1,000 years,
Yeah.
um, and so we can move the story forward by going back in time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a thrill because who knows what has happened on that plot of land. Even in the 20 years that Trevor has been dead,
Yeah.
um, so much has happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a thrill. I think the other thing fundamentally is like the show is about connection, and
Mm-hmm.
we are dealing with this existential subject matter of life and death. And so, by definition, we are connecting the living and the dead, which
Mm-hmm.
in most circumstances would feel very dark and very heavy. And we're kind of clowning around it and cracking jokes because, we all may want to sit down with our grandparents or great grandparents or ancestors and find some kind of deep significance in that because that's how we kind of revere the past. But if you actually did that, you may realize that those people had some points of view that you probably wouldn't agree with anymore. So we get to lean into that. So I think it's a surprising, like that kind of mortality and sense of loss is right there with us.
Hmm.
But because we're living in the land of clowning around and we're all like Muppets to a certain degree, we
Hmm.
can swing to the comedy and then swing to the heart really, really quickly and easily.
Hmm.
And our showrunners do a great job, Joe Port and Joe Wiseman, of straddling that line and keeping you kind of guessing in terms of what note we're going to hit at any given moment.
Yes. Switching sides real quick.
Yeah.
Teaching acting in such a diverse setting, as Hunter College and Rikers Island must provide unique perspectives. How does these experiences influence your approach to storytelling in both of your teaching and your role in Ghost?
You know, I think I think it's very hard to teach anyone anything.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't mean that as a negative. I just think it is it's hard to learn something.
Yeah,
Um, as someone who has learning disabilities, I can tell you it was very hard to learn a lot of things.
me too.
Um, and there you go. And there is so as a teacher, what happens is you very quickly, and what I did when it came to acting was I made a point of getting down to what are the most important things. How do I make this thing that is kind of amorphous, that you it's not like I'm teaching someone to build a table that you
Hmm.
can like see the table as you're building it. You're never going to see yourself act.
Yeah.
So it's inherently disorienting. So how do I give someone the things that are true, they're always true, they're never not going to be true, that you can kind of grab onto, because there's also an element of this that you have to allow for a certain level of chaos,
Mhm.
because life is a chaotic thing and we are trying to create the illusion that we are playing people who are living, so there is a huge element of spontaneity to all this stuff. So by kind of honing in on the most important thing, what the priority is to get across to someone, teaching really helped me with that. And then what it did for me as an actor was, it got me very clear on, again, what my job is.
Mhm.
Right before we audition or right before we act, I would always say this: is you're never going to be dumber than when you're about to perform. Like our brains just go back to like, our most nervous, scared place. So having that thing that you can hold on to, and then it's also been really great in the opportunities when I've been able to direct or something, or tell or write, or it knowing this is collaboration that's happening between a director and an actor. What is the thing that I need from the actor, the bare minimum, to tell the story? And then if I can get that, I can allow for collaboration to fill in the rest.
Mhm.
So teaching, I think, has had a lot of really positive impacts, uh, for me. And then above all, it's like just being able. I just ran into a student on the street the other day who's getting her MFA at Columbia right now, who's a fantastic actor, and just seeing that you've had any kind of impact on someone else and someone's journey, um, is a thrill, because I think as an actor, a lot of this can feel very amorphous, and so feeling like you're doing something, having any kind of change is really rewarding.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me. So excited, love your work in the Ghost, and I'm really happy for all that you're doing and with teaching and everything that you're doing right now. I really, really admire
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Nice
it.
talking to you.
You too. Have a great one.